Hello and welcome to FACT's webinar, Preparing for Lambing Season. Our guest presenter is Lydia Strand. I'm Samantha Gasson, FACT's Humane Farming Program Manager, and I will be moderating this session. Thank you for joining us. Before we dive right in, let me take a minute or two to do a few quick introductions. Food Animal Concerns Trust, or FACT, is a national nonprofit organization headquartered in Illinois that works to ensure that all food-producing animals are raised in a humane and healthy manner. We accomplish this by supporting humane farmers through our Humane Farming Program, promoting policies that make foods from animals safe and healthy to eat through our Safe and Healthy Foods Program, and generally help consumers make informed food choices. Please visit our website at foodanimalconcerns.org to learn more about our farmer services. I love this photo of Lydia. At this time, I am very pleased to introduce our esteemed presenter, Lydia Strand. Lydia, along with her husband, Jared, own and operate Lydia's Flock Icelandic sheep just outside of Bellingham, Washington. They are first-generation farmers who began shepherding with 2 sheep in the backyard of their South Seattle home in 2010, along with a small flock of heritage breed laying hens. In the past 14 years, the flock has grown to 70 sheep with 60 to 75 lambs annually, raised for pasture-raised lamb, registered breeding stock, raw fleeces, yarn, roving, batting, and felted household items. The farm also provides beginning and ongoing shepherding education, mentorship, and consultation, with a focus on pasture-based management systems and breed. Raise and train Great Pyrenees puppies for livestock guardianship. In addition to all things sheep, they also raise pastured heritage breed laying hens and 3 Guernsey cows for a future micro-dairy endeavor. As many of you who have received a scholarship in the last 9 months, Lydia's name will be very familiar to you because she is FACT's Humane Farming Program Assistant. So we are very lucky to have Lydia with us today to share her experience and expertise. So without further ado, Lydia, I will turn the floor over to you and please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. Thank you, Sam, for that wonderful introduction and for the opportunity to be a part of Food Animal Concerns Trust. So today we are going to talk about preparations for lambing. So a couple of things I want to say before we get started. This information is based on what our experience is on our farm. It is not a replacement for professional advice and consultation with your veterinarian. Additionally, I want to make sure that people understand that this is our personal experience and that every lambing experience and every lambing season on every farm is going to be different based on a number of things that vary from farm to farm. I am not an expert on lambing, and even though I've been doing it for many years, I think there's always learning to be done. And so I want to be clear that what works on our farm may not work on your farm, and that's okay. Lastly, I've included my email address on the last slide of this PowerPoint. So if you have questions that you don't feel are answered in this presentation, or you have specific questions you'd like to discuss in detail, feel free to email me. I will get back to you as time permits, but I want to make sure that people feel that the information is accessible to them outside of this. So we'll go ahead and get started. We raise Icelandic sheep. We've also been raising Shetland sheep, but this year we've decided to sell off that flock. So the majority of these photos in here are of Icelandic sheep. So this is just a little kind of table of contents of what we'll be discussing today. Know that if we run out of time, we will find, FACT will find another opportunity for us to continue this conversation. There's a lot of information present here, so I want to make sure that everyone feels their questions are answered, and I don't want to rush. So here we go. Hold on just a minute here. Okay. So nutrition and care in late gestation. So average sheep gestation is 145 days. That can vary between sheep breeds. Icelandics are 142 to 144. There are some breeds that are closer to 148. So to have a sense of when your lambs may be due, document when you put your rams in, and that will help you to be better prepared. We don't leave our rams in with our ewes for too long, because we don't want to have a spread out lambing season. My goal is to have a 2 to 3 week lambing season. So We wait until November when we know that the ewes have been cycling for a couple of rounds and know that they'll be receptive to the ram. So 70% of lamb growth occurs in the last 6 weeks of gestation. That's a big, big deal. So in order to make sure that we have healthy ewes and healthy lambs, we need to increase those nutritional demands, especially for those sheep that are carrying twins, triplets, or more. And we do have a line of ewes in our flock that do occasionally produce a set of quads. So to determine what your nutritional needs may be for your flock, the best way to assess this is through body condition scoring and figuring out, like, do you have sheep that are too heavy? Do you have sheep that are too thin? And so doing a body condition scoring, and I have a little graphic here on the screen that will tell you kind of what that looks like, is important. So you want to find the bottom of the rib cage where it meets the spinous process and give that a feel. And if you open your hand and feel across where your fingers meet your palm, it should feel like that. So not too thin and not too fat. If you have ewes that are too thin, it can be a challenge to get them to an appropriate body condition score of 3.5, which is approximately where ewes should be before lambing, if it's late in gestation. So you'll need to keep an extra eye on them and ensure they're getting enough to eat so that they don't end up in a situation where they're in a negative energy reserve, which results in ketosis, which we'll talk about in a minute. Do not underfeed ewes. If you do not ultrasound your ewes for pregnancy and have a sense of how many lambs they may be carrying, feed them as though they're carrying twins. That means that you're kind of covering your bases and it's not stressing the ewes. Additionally, exercise is quite important. Ewes need to be moving their muscles. And while their uterus is not an active muscle in their musculature, all the muscles that surround it are. So it's very important to make sure that they're getting plenty of exercise. And also, just exercise is good for the mind as well, whether you're a person or a sheep. So ketosis prevention. So ketosis happens when a ewe has high energy demands on her body in late gestation because those ewes or those lambs are growing so quickly, and she doesn't have enough energy. She's not taking in enough energy to be able to feed herself and grow those lambs. And so she goes into a negative energy cycle. So what happens is the body starts to try to break down fat reserves, and that can cause something called ketones to occur, and they become toxic in the blood. And that in turn causes the ewe to become depressed, not want to eat, and they'll go down and you won't be able to get them back up. If a ewe is suffering from ketosis and it isn't caught easily, or not easily, but quickly in the beginning, there's an 80% mortality rate, meaning you'll often lose the ewe and the lambs. So it's very important to be managing their nutrition in late gestation very closely. For us, we're grass-fed only, so we're giving additional alfalfa hay once a day in the evening to the ewes on top of their regular Timothy hay that they receive. Some people do grain, and that works very successfully for them. Icelandic sheep do best on a grass-based diet. So if I have a ewe that I know is going to have triplets or more, I may have an area of the barn where she and her fellow tripleting ewes will live, and they will receive a higher plane of nutrition. Internal parasite management. In order to protect from parasite resistance on your property, managing parasites all through the whole year is very important. So for internal parasite management for ewes, because their immune system can become suppressed or stressed during lambing and early lactation, something called the periparturient parasite rise will occur. And that gives those parasites a great opportunity to have a big old party and reproduce rapidly. I don't recommend deworming in advance of this, but rather doing fecal tests and managing FOMACHA scores to determine if ewes need to be dewormed pre or post lambing. We do not, at our farm, we do not have a blanket like parasite management plan where we're just deworming on a schedule. We're only doing it when needed, and actually it happens very rarely. If you aren't managing your your postpartum ewes for parasites, the situation can get out of control rather quickly if the ewe is under a great amount of stress, meaning they had a troublesome lambing, or they had health issues prior to lambing, or maybe they had ketosis and you caught it, but they have a lot of lambs to care for. So those ewes need to have extra supervision, and you need to look at them more closely in order to be able to ensure that they're not dealing with parasite overload on top of everything else that they're going through postpartum. So micronutrient supplementation is vital to sheep throughout the whole year, but especially at lambing time. Loose mineral needs to always need to be available. I know there are plenty of individuals out there using mineral blocks. Sheep cannot uptake enough from a mineral block to be able to meet their nutrient needs. Additionally, they will scrape and scrape and scrape their teeth on the block, which then can lead to broken teeth and mouth sores. So part of the micronutrient supplementation specific to late gestation ewes is selenium and vitamin E. Vitamin E does not cross the placenta, so the only way that lambs can obtain it is through colostrum. So in late gestation, I'm adding extra powdered vitamin E that's purchased from Premier One, along with extra selenium into the mineral, so that I can ensure that my ewes have that on hand for themselves and for their lambs. Selenium and vitamin E are vital to sheep all the time, but especially at this time, because they prevent things like white muscle disease from happening, which, if their nutrition is not adequate, can cause lambs to become lame, wasting disease for muscles, and they can die. So lambing facilities, barn lambing versus pasture lambing. We do a lot of barn lambing here in the Pacific Northwest. Our pastures are too wet to be able to have the sheep out on pasture for lambing time, unless we were going to lamb in like June, and sometimes it's still wet then. So these are the circumstances under which barn lambing may be more appropriate for your region versus pasture lambing. I know of a farm in Wisconsin that doesn't put their rams in until late December, early January, so that they can lamb out on pasture. So it depends on what your management style is, what your infrastructure is, how much work you want to do, as pasture lambing can be less significant regarding infrastructure and cleaning than barn lambing can be. In any situation, whether you're barn lambing or pasture lambing, needs to be an area where the sheep can find shelter or be out of the weather, draft free, with good ventilation, clean, and whether it's sheltering inside a barn or sheltering in some trees, ewes need to be able to have a safe place to take their lambs. And if you're pasture lambing, have a plan in place in case of cold weather, or if you have a ewe that's had a difficult lambing, or you have bottle lambs, or a lamb that just can't keep up with its twin and its mother, then it's important to make sure that you have kind of alternate plans available. For barn lambing, it's important to just keep everything clean and to rebed as needed to keep it nice and dry. And for us, we're using jugs post lambing, and we're cleaning those out and rebedding them after each use. So that's about every 48 hours in the thick of lambing, to make sure that no body fluids are going to confuse a ewe thinking that it's the lamb isn't hers, and also just to prevent the spread of any kind of disease. So preparations and supplies. One of the important preparations that
Lydia, can I just interrupt you? I'm really sorry. What did you mean when you said jugs? Somebody just asked.
Oh, okay. So I was going to talk about that coming up. So a lambing jug is it depends on what breed of sheep you're raising, but like our jugs are 4 feet by 4 feet square. We use those short hog panels, and my husband trims them down to 4 feet pieces, and we clip them together, and you put the ewes and lambs in there post lambing to give them an opportunity to bond. And in the Icelandic sheep breed, we have very protective ewes, and so you'll have a ewe just come up and slam another ewe's lamb. So it just kind of helps everybody calm down, bond with their lambs. If they've had a difficult lambing, just an opportunity to rest. And they stay in there for, depending on how much, what's gone on or how many lambs they have, probably about 48 hours on average. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. So preparations and supplies, determining when you want to shear. Many people will shear their ewes before lambing. I think it's a personal preference, depends on your weather, the breed of sheep that you have, the space that you're using for lambing. So mucking out your lambing areas if you're going to be lambing inside, and make sure to allow them to dry before you put down fresh bedding. Setting up your lambing jugs in advance so you're not trying to deal with a ewe and her lambs, getting them out of the lambing space and into the lambing jug. Just put up a few jugs and that helps you to be prepared. Have access to smaller water buckets that you can clip up so that lambs don't tip into the bucket and drown. I have heard of this happening where a lamb has been born and 10 minutes later it was drowned in the bucket. So have those buckets up high for the first few days, and you don't need to use large buckets if the buckets are just for each individual ewe or a few ewes. Then wash your towels and have them in a clean, dry container. Barns are dusty, damp. It's nice to be able to have those very clean, fresh towels ready to go. Basic supplies. In the resources that Sam is going to send out on my behalf in the next day or so, I will provide a very comprehensive list of lambing supplies for all of you. So I just put in a few of the basics. And don't forget to take care of yourself in this list of supplies, making sure that you have warm clothes for yourself, waterproof overalls, snacks that you can keep in the barn, and also a headlamp. And always make sure that you have the phone number close by of your vet and an experienced shepherd, and confirm in advance that they will be able to help you. Do not wait until you have an emergency to reach out to a vet and say, oh, I need your help. Make sure that you've contacted them prior to the start of lambing to ensure that they know who you are and your flock size, and maybe even have an opportunity to visit and see your setup before lambing begins. Record keeping. Assist with evaluating flock performance and production. So this is specific to every farm, specific goals, management practices, and objectives. Keep it simple. I know some people who have a very complex record keeping system, and that is okay. But for beginners, I would encourage you to start out simple. For us, this helps me determine which sheep I want to keep on the farm. And as we're raising our own replacement ewes, I want to know what ewes are really performing well, and if their lambs are performing well, and if not, then they will be culled. So having that information well documented and easily accessible helps with making those decisions. I will also be sending out a copy of the paper barn record that we use immediately after lambs are born with the resources. All that information is later added to a spreadsheet on the, Google Sheets or whatever you want to use, so that you've got that information and can make comparisons and notes as needed. I think this is a vital part of how things work on the farm. And also, if you have more than one person that's helping with lambing, you know that you're keeping information consistent. We keep our lambing record in a plastic sheet that goes inside a covered clipboard with a pencil. It's easy to locate. It's near the scale and sling, so that it's not complicated to be able to weigh the lambs after they're born and hopefully before they nurse for the first time, so you get a pretty accurate weight. So abortion. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about this, because I feel that if you have an idea that maybe this is happening on your farm, you need to talk to your vet. So I've just covered the most common abortion-related diseases. Understand that these can pose a health risk to humans. So if you're pregnant, thinking you may become pregnant, do not involve yourself in lambing, because these can spread to humans and they can affect unborn children. So be aware of that. Just keep it in the forefront of your mind. So 2 of them were talking about the Campylobacter that enters the flock by adding outside sheep. And here are some of the kind of characteristics of that you may see. It does have a preventative vaccine that is available. I think you can order it through Premier One or other livestock supply companies. You don't need a prescription for it. And if you are seeing any of this, please reach out to your vet. bag up any samples, any tissue that's left over. If you do have something, if you do have what you think is an abortion, wrap it up in plastic, put it in your refrigerator to keep it fresh, and reach out to your vet about how you can get that to a diagnostic lab to determine if that is in fact what you're dealing with. So toxoplasmosis is relatively common out here in the Pacific Northwest, where we have a huge feral cat problem, and cat colonies are caught, and then those cats are attempted to be rehomed on farms and in barns, and that toxoplasmosis will spread in their feces. So if you have a cat living in your barn and they're pooping on your hay, or they're pooping in the area where the sheep are bedding down at night, this puts your ewes at a high risk for exposure to toxoplasmosis. Additionally, it can also spread in the semen of rams. So minimize contact of sheep feed and cats. And if you bring new barn cats onto your farm, find a way to keep them away from your hay source and out of the sheep bedding. Ewes that become infected will have immunity. So you may see this one time, maybe you have an abortion storm where you have a bunch of ewes that are aborting all at the same time, and you may never see it again. So prevention for abortion: keep a closed flock. Do not take sheep off your farm for showing, rent out, or share rams, or have ewes from another farm come to your farm to be bred. You can vaccinate, as I said, for Campylobacter, and I addressed about the cats. So if you suspect that you have an outbreak, isolate the ewe, clean up any fluids, tissue, and fetuses with gloves. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands so that it doesn't spread. And ensure that you're bagging things up for disposal, putting them in the refrigerator, and contacting your vet to see how you can get that to a diagnostic veterinary laboratory as quickly as possible. Often the results will be unclear. However, if you can get the information, it's wonderful. So if you have to clean up an area with soiled bedding, line the area afterwards and keep pregnant ewes away from that area. So contact your veterinarian again if you see any of these symptoms of abortion. Ask for guidance and support in that way. Especially if you're new, please don't try to navigate this alone. Is it time? So the big question, especially for first-time shepherds, are we there yet? So here are a few of the characteristics that you will see as lambing gets closer. I know that it can be very nerve-wracking waiting that first year for signs that lambing is imminent. Please be patient and know that 99 times out of 100, your ewe is going to know exactly what to do. It's going to be okay. So a few things. Udder will be very pink, very full, and take on an almost waxy appearance. The teats will fill with colostrum, and I mean, like, they will be sticking out like, I don't know, it's just they take on they go from being flaccid to being very turgid. And so you will notice a difference, and it can happen in a matter of hours with an experienced ewe, and may take a little longer with a first-time lambing ewe. So do not mess with or squeeze teats pre-lambing. There are wax plugs in there to keep bacteria out of the teats, and so it's very important that that is maintained so that you're not risking infection to the ewe or to the lamb. Vulva will be bright pink and swollen with possible discharge. You'll also see maybe they kind of start to walk a little more in the style of a cowboy because their ligaments are loosening up in time for the lamb to come. They may stay away from the feeder, the rest of the flock. They'll be up and down, pawing, straining, and have a faraway look in their eyes. Often that's the first thing we see, is that they just are like off in the corner, kind of gazing around with a faraway look. So they may not be interested in interacting with anyone. They maybe just want to be left alone. And we have some ewes who will go up and just slam other ewes when they're in early labor, just because they're like, this is actually my space and you're not going to be here. You may notice some kind of thick discharge that looks like mucus. That will be the loss of the cervical mucus plug, and then the presentation of the water bag. So normal lambing, there's 3 stages. The first stage is 1 to 4 hours on average. Don't set your watch to this because every sheep is going to be unique. First time lambing ewes may take longer, and you may not notice anything until it's time for the water bag to present. So please be patient and understand that each ewe is going to have her own path to giving birth. So the second stage should not on average take too long. So as it says, 45 minutes to an hour. So yeah, and usually things just move right along with an experienced ewe if everybody's in the proper position. Large single lambs in the proper position may take more time. So if it's a first time lambing ewe, or you've had your ewes scanned and you know that there's a few that are just going to have singles, go ahead and be mindful of that and just be patient. So the third stage is less than 12 hours, usually 2 to 3, can be 4 to 6 of the passing of the placenta. That may take a little longer depending on if the ewe had challenges at lambing or she had a lot of lambs and is just exhausted. So keep a watch on that. If that placenta doesn't pass after 12 hours, you may have an issue with a retained placenta, which can often happen because of nutritional deficiencies. So reach out to your vet. Don't ever pull on that placenta. Leave it there. And unfortunately, sometimes what needs to happen is it just needs to rot out. Not a fun thing, doesn't smell great, but if you were to pull on the placenta, you can cause bleeding and hemorrhaging, and the ewe could die. So the 30-30-30-30 principle, it's usually referred to as the 30-30-30 principle, but according to Laura Lawson, who wrote the book Managing Your Ewe and Her Newborn Lamb, she added an extra 30. So the first 30 means that after 30 minutes of hard contractions, if you don't see a lamb, you need to examine the ewe. After 30 minutes from when the water bag presents, if you don't see a lamb, you need to check the ewe. If you examine the ewe and everything is fine and the lamb is in normal presentation, give it another 30 minutes before you decide to assist or before you do another exam. And if the unassisted ewe has not delivered her second lamb and you know she's got more than one in there, go ahead and do an exam. If the lambing is moving along normally, don't pull the lambs prematurely, as you can cause injury, hemorrhaging, or potential rejection from the ewe because she was not able to experience lambing in the way that she was supposed to, which can affect hormone levels and the ability for her to have repeated contractions, which is part of the process of giving birth. So I have a little video here I'm going to show you that my husband took last year. This is a Shetland ewe that's going to be lambing here. She doesn't completely give birth, but I just wanted to show you this so that you could see what the normal presentation looks like. Oops, sorry about that. Hold on a minute here. Hold on just a minute, everybody. Sorry about that. Sam, do you have some guidance here?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. We've never really had much success with people doing that. Can you get back to your slideshow? Do you have that in another spot?
I'm trying to here. I'm sorry. I stopped sharing my screen for a minute so that I can find out where I need to be.
Okay, I'll stop sharing you.
Okay, so I'm back here and I'll share it again. Sorry, guys. Forgive me for this.
So Lydia, I don't know how much success you're going to have doing that.
Okay, let me
We
get back to where I need to be. I apologize here.
Yeah, just get back to your slideshow and
Okay.
I'll see if I can pull it up as a separate link.
Okay, 1 second. That's all right. And it's going to go out in the it's going to go out in the slides anyway, so everybody can see it after that.
Okay.
So we'll just skip that. That's just fine. Let's see what's supposed to be here. Okay, sorry about that. I'm new to PowerPoints. So when to intervene? 3 causes of dystocia, which can be, that's just lambing problems. So small or immature pelvic development, abnormal presentation, or inadequate contractions or dilation. The photo of the lamb included on this slide is actually the result of a C-section. So the ewe's pelvis was too narrow and he had very large horn buds and was a single. And so we ended up having to have a C-section done. They both survived, but the following year, the ewe had the same situation again, where the lamb was too big to be able to get out of her pelvis. And so unfortunately, we had to have her euthanized. So lesson about management in that, but also don't try to pull a lamb that won't fit through the pelvis. So signs of dystocia. You may be grinding your teeth, refusing to eat, have droopy ears, acting depressed. They may be very restless getting up and down, and they're straining like they're in labor, and they may be pushing and being very verbal, but you're not seeing a water bag, or you may see a little trickle of fluid, but nothing is happening. And you may even see a portion of the lamb that's visible at the vulva. So you may see a muzzle or a hoof or one back leg. So just be, I mean, there's just a number. I can't describe to you all of the presentations you might see in a situation where there's dystocia, but if a ewe is not making progress after a certain amount of time and you're hearing that she's being very vocal or grinding her teeth, it's important to go in and do an internal exam. Frequent squatting as if to urinate is a huge one that we've seen in our flock, where they just keep acting like they need to go to the bathroom and they're just not. So, and actually that's what his mother was doing. So internal examination can be done standing up or on the ewe's side. Make sure you have appropriate supplies with you. Wash your hands and wrists well, dry with a clean towel. So be gentle, glove up, use lots and lots and lots of lube. If you need to remove your hands and touch something outside the ewe, put fresh gloves on again. And so making sure that a person with small hands is going in to do this, this opening is not huge. You're only going to be able to get one hand in, and those are going to be your eyes. If the cervix is not relaxed, or if the vagina is not relaxed, or the cervix isn't dilated, you need to give the ewe another 15 to 20 minutes and check again. And if you need to go in past the cervix, you need to treat with an injectable antibiotic. And even if I just go in just to check the presentation of a lamb and it's in fine presentation and I don't go past the cervix, I might give a ewe antibiotic because I would prefer to err on the side of caution. Making sure when you go in and your hand is cupped and you're moving very slowly and very gentle is vitally important. Have your nails trimmed because they can rip through a glove. Don't try to be in a hurry. Take your time, because if you can't figure out what's going on, you just call your vet. So here are some examples of malpresentation. As I said, take your time to determine what you're feeling. If you hit resistance, you need to stop and reevaluate the lamb's positioning. If you don't know and you have someone else there to help with lambing, ask them to wash their hands, glove up, lube up, and go in and tell you what they're feeling. Dead lambs can be a common cause of malpresentation. They can also be a common cause of a dry environment, so it can be difficult to remove them. Deliver with care in case the lamb has been dead for some time and has begun to decompose, because it can be a mess and it exposes the ewe to potential infection. Always use lots of lube. The world isn't running out of lube. You can get it through your vet, through Premier One. There are lots of ways to make sure that you have lube on hand. And if you don't have lube, you can do something like use dish soap, which is like a last resort, but it's there. Keep the vulva clean. Wash it before you're going in to do an internal examination to ensure that you're working not with a sterile field, but with a very clean field. And if you're struggling, don't wait to get help. So these are examples of different malpresentations. And so each one of them, except for the one that's in normal position, but even then you may have to assist if it's a very large lamb or they have large horn buds, which we experience in Icelandic sheep. So just trying to be aware of what malpresentation it is that you're looking, or that you're looking at, but what you're dealing with before you start moving a lamb around. And we can answer some specific questions about, I can answer some specific questions about malpresentations at the end for how to correct. So newborn lamb care, and I'm going to try to get through this slide relatively quickly so we can move on to questions here in a few minutes. Clear the lamb's face of mucus and confirm that the lamb is breathing. Clip, dip, strip. If you have a long umbilical cord, clip it to about 2 inches. Dip it in iodine and strip the ewe's teat so that you know she's got colostrum available, and the lamb will be able to latch on and obtain colostrum quickly. So want lambs on their feet quickly. If they aren't getting up, what's the reason? Make sure that there's no mismothering, that ewes are accepting and mothering their lambs, cleaning them off, nickering to them, following them when they do get up to make sure that you don't have possible rejection. Make sure to move ewes to a jug after lambing to ensure bonding if you're lambing indoors. And jugs are not a requirement. It's just we have a lot of sheep, and so that's what works for us. And if you have a first-time ewe who seems very anxious or doesn't want to let her lambs nurse, and this even happens with ewes that have lambed before, and they seem very jumpy about letting their lambs nurse, just walk away for 15 minutes, give them some privacy, move your anxiety and high energy, just kind of high energy out of the barn. And when you come back, usually they've worked everything out. Check the ewes and lambs frequently. Just make sure everything is going on. I mean, some people will sit out in the lambing barn all day if they can, and that's fine. But if you're otherwise busy, try to go out there every hour or so during the day. Check that lambs are able to go to the bathroom okay. And if you're seeing that they have scours or any kind of diarrhea, it needs to be treated immediately.
Hey, Lydia.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to stop you here because we've got quite a few questions, and I think dealing with newborn lambs will be a great topic for a webinar, let's say the week of April 1st. What do you think?
All right. Okay, that's great. That's perfect.
So yeah, you guys, I just think I want to make sure we get as many of these questions answered as possible, because there's a lot of really great stuff being asked out there. So let's go ahead. While I'm going to let everybody start formulating their thoughts, and I'm going to go ahead and do our poll. Where is everything? Ah, that's why. Sorry. I'm using 2 screens and my screen's too big. The other screen I have is much larger and it's not working. Okay. All right. So
So can I mention something, Sam? Really
yeah,
quick?
while I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about BOCI shots, which are injections of selenium and vitamin E that are given to ewes or to lambs to potentially minimize white muscle disease or make sure that the ewe has enough selenium and vitamin E on board. Those injections are fine. I think it is preferred to make sure that the ewe is getting enough of those minerals before she gives birth in order to make sure that they are on board. So just wanted to say that. I know there were some questions that people submitted asking about using BOCI, and I think it's fine, but it can be a challenge for a lamb to uptake that BOCI injection when they're very small. So actually we give all of our ewes a BOCI injection about a month before lambing. At the same time, we give them a CDT vaccination, and then they get the increased selenium and vitamin E in their mineral.
All right. So as you can see, we've got a poll up. If you guys wouldn't mind answering that, that would be fantastic. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the first question we have, which is, here we go. Carissa is curious about how to tell if your sheep are pregnant this time of year. I recently got a new ram and I was hoping to have my old ram as cleanup, but I unfortunately lost him to respiratory illness. Any tips or tricks besides ultrasound?
You can have blood tests done. You can either draw blood yourself, or you can have your veterinarian come out and draw blood to confirm pregnancy. Um, Otherwise, you wait.
So there's, oh, I realized my video isn't on. There are pregnancy checks for cows, so they're not urine pregnancy checks for cows, so they're not for sheep.
No, they're not that I'm aware of anyway. I think the most accurate way for us to determine if a sheep is pregnant, if we aren't ultrasounding, is a blood test.
Okay. Um, Julia would like to know, can you talk about when and where and how to best pull lambs? I feel like you answered that in one of your slides, but Julia, if you want to ask a follow-up question, I'll make sure it gets answered. Tess would like to know, please discuss lambing when a ewe has had recent or prior prolapse. Thank you for that, Tess. That's a good one.
So, Tess, I'm going to be really direct and honest with you and say that if we've had a ewe in our flock that's had a prolapse, we would not breed that ewe again. That can be a genetic issue, and we have actually never had an Icelandic sheep in our flock prolapse. We've had where they've been carrying triplets or more, and so when they lay down, their vagina can kind of stick out a little bit, but we've never had a ewe prolapse. We did have a cross ewe lamb in the beginning that I bred, and she prolapsed and died. But I can't give any advice on that. I think that would be something to discuss with a veterinarian.
All right, and to follow up in the chat, somebody says, it's Stenny, she says, I use ram marking harnesses and change the color after 2 to 3 weeks. If the ewes don't get marked in the new color, they've likely settled the first time. This also helps mark for a more specific date for when I expect lambs from that ewe. How very clever.
Yes. I think that's wonderful to be able to do. We do not use marking harnesses. We have cameras in our barn. Also, we do something called the ram effect, where you keep the ewes separate from a ram for, from like September to late October, and then we'll put a ram in the barn, but not in with the ewes, and his smell will get them cycling and synced up, hopefully, so that we have about a 2 week lambing, 2 to 3 week lambing period. So we're going to start doing artificial insemination on the farm this next fall. And so we may be doing things a little differently. But I believe that marking harnesses are an excellent resource to be able to track when your ewes are due. And also, are they pregnant? If you don't want to use ultrasound.
Okay, Lyric asks, I hear the risk of underfeeding, but is there a risk for overfeeding as well and having ewes with a body score of 5 during gestation?
Yes, they are also at risk for ketosis. They can have more trouble with lambing. They can have big lambs, big fat stuck lambs. So if you have a ewe that's been overfed, I would say be easy on what you're going to feed them those last 45, 48 days of gestation, so that they're not. I think that it can be a challenge to manage an overfed ewe in those last 45 days if you supplement them with too much, but also they're at risk for ketosis. So it's a fine line. They just need a little more monitoring.
And I will say, I had a really fat ewe. We called her Shamu because she was that fat. And I probably shouldn't share that. But anyway, so she had triplets every single year and she was always obese and never had any problems. And we actually had her right up until she was 15 and she lambed until she was 13. Not on purpose, but she was just eager to have babies. But anyway, so Patricia has a question. Is it, so I know you talked about mineral blocks. Patricia wants to know, is it still good practice to have a protein block available?
So protein is for late gestation is usually supplemented in food. We don't use a protein block here on the farm. We use actually a goat mineral because our sheep need a significantly, well, I don't want to say significant, but our sheep need more copper than many other breeds. So I feel like it's best if they can get their protein from feed. However, if you have spoken with your veterinarian or other breeders who are raising the same type of sheep that you are, that is beneficial to the flock, that's great. Again, that packed block, though, can be challenging for them to uptake all of that nutrition.
So Diane would like to know if you've had any luck getting used to healthy levels using selenium/vitamin E paste from Duravet, giving it to use 3 to 4 weeks pre-lambing.
Sure, you can also do that if you'd prefer not to give the injections or can't get it from your veterinarian. I think that is a good alternative.
Do you find, oh, this is my question, this isn't anybody else's question. I'm just curious, do you find with dairy sheep, do they ever have problems with milk fever like like a dairy cow will have? Do you have
Yes,
to
they
worry
can.
about?
Yes.
So what's your process? I mean, I know you don't do dairy sheep, but what would you recommend? Is it sort of similar to a cow, just getting some
Yes.
calcium in them before they go into labor?
Yes, and I think you may not, yes, if you're seeing signs, what you can do is you can crush up some Tums and don't use generic. Use like actual Tums and crush them up and mix them in water and drench the ewe orally if you like do not have the calcium gluconate on hand to be able to get that into the ewe. So I can't tell you how many Tums because I couldn't find any information anywhere or get a straight answer on how many you would need to crush up and in what amount of liquid, but that's what you would do if you see, I mean, don't give them 50, right? Like, but you
That'd be
know,
expensive.
yeah, right. So don't do that. But our vet recommends that in the last 45 days of gestation that we give 1 Tums to each pregnant sheep that will take them.
Really?
So yeah, just to help because they have such a demand, they have such a drain on their calcium levels because they're growing those bones, so the lamb's bones. So yeah, we just get a big container from Costco, but don't get generic ones, get actual Tums.
All right. You should be like doing a commercial for Tums or something. I bet they have really
No, I
big.
don't. They're disgusting, actually, but yeah.
So Cameron would like, we're back where there seems to be a lot of questions about mineral supplements. So
Mhm.
Cameron would like to know, how do you use free choice nutrient selection amongst your herd outside those loose minerals?
Can you read the question again?
Do you use free choice nutrient selection amongst your herd outside of loose minerals?
No, I don't feel that with what we use that's necessary. I add additional things in like selenium salt, extra kelp, a little bit of granulated molasses. So they're not separated out, those minerals, but they're all contained and I mix it up and then give it to the sheep.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
I think so. If it doesn't, Cameron, go ahead and ask an additional question because I'm glad I stopped you, Lydia, because questions keep coming. So we're going to have a hard time answering the questions that are already here. But go ahead and I will try and answer that. We'll try and get Lydia to answer that if you can clarify if that's okay or not. So 4x4 jugs for Craig asks. So 4x4 jugs for post lambing. What size jug/pen for pre-lambing and active lambing?
So we don't use anything for pre-lambing or active lambing. And as I said, we lamb in the barn. So the ewes have one whole side of the barn that is freshly bedded down every 3 days. And if they start to lamb in there, unless we have a ewe who's absolutely being aggressive, we just leave them in there in the communal area to lamb. We don't move them during lambing because that can cause stress and the whole lambing process can stop and be stalled because they're like, nope, you took me away from the spot where I thought I was going to lamb. Penning them during lambing can cause any number of issues. It can cause ewes to step on lambs because there's not enough space. They can also just get panicky because they're confined. We want to give the ewes the opportunity to be as comfortable and relaxed as possible during this time. And sometimes we have mothers who are lambing out next to their daughters and do not want to be away from them. And so we want to make sure that we're perpetuating their comfort during that time. So we don't pen ewes pre-lambing or an active lambing. And our jug size is based on the size of the sheep we breed. So it would be different if you were raising Suffolks or Romneys than if you're raising Icelandic. So I would base jug size on the size of the ewe.
Okay, Jennifer would like to know, would aggression be an issue for Dorper sheep?
What
Is aggression an issue for Dorper sheep? Do you know much about Dorpers?
I don't know much about Dorpers at all.
If anybody knows anything about Dorpers, I'm thinking we've got Linda Coffey in the audience here, so please chat. Okay, Elizabeth raises Dorpers. Answer that question in the chat, please, Elizabeth, and I'll try and catch it before the recording is finished. So this one is about tail docking. Do you have any particular advice on ewes with tails that are not docked, and advice on docking lambs?
So we do not dock lambs here. We do not castrate lambs here, so I cannot speak to that. We raise Northern European short tail breed sheep, meaning their tails do not require docking, and that is against the breed standard. So if we're registering Icelandic sheep, they cannot have their tails docked. So I would encourage you to find a breeder that can that is doing what you're doing and that can answer those questions, or reach out and speak with your veterinarian.
All right, and Linda Coffey followed up about the Dorper. She said overprotective sheep can happen in, whoops. This is why I don't like answering questions in the chat, because I lost it. Sorry, Linda. Overprotective sheep can happen in any breed. Plenty of space really helps.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Elizabeth, who said she breeds Dorpers, says it depends on the ewe, but some are more protective than others. Nothing particularly unusual about Dorpers and Katahdins. And I have St. Croix's Dorpers and Katahdins, and I've never had an issue, but we don't put them in the barn at all for lambing because we don't have to.
If we were in a situation where we could pasture lamb, I absolutely 100% would. I do not want to be lambing in the barn. I do not think it is in the best interest of the sheep. It's not a welfare concern. It's mostly just like, I feel like they would thrive lambing in the pasture instead of in the barn.
Yeah. So Tess, she wanted to follow up, and she said, so you were saying injectable BOSE at the same time as CDT?
Mm-hmm.
She is.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we've got about 5 more minutes, and we'll keep going till we get to the end of our time. Linda Coffey, I feel like, yeah, this is a good time to mention ATRA with NCAT. NCAT is sort of the parent of ATRA, but ATRA has a lot of really fantastic information, and Linda Coffey is one of their educators there. And so yeah, please visit ATRA, and Linda, if you want to send me an email with that link, then I will make sure I send that out in the follow-up email. So somebody asks, we purchased some younger ewes and a ram that came together approximately 8 months of age. As we were quarantined, they were together. Is it possible for pregnancy to happen this young? Sorry, I don't know, as they were quarantined. I'm assuming as the sheep were quarantined. I'm not going back to 2020 and they were quarantined. Sorry, I was thinking about people quarantining. Sorry. Is it possible for pregnancy to happen this young? We did see him mount a ewe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If you see a ram mounting a ewe, yes. I mean, and most sheep are reaching sexual maturity. Most lambs are by 5 to 6 months of age. There can be a window in there, right? Some maybe earlier or later, depending on a number of things I won't go into right now. But yes, and so document that date. I hope that you documented that date and then watch for lambs.
Eeks. Did you ever use CMPK as an oral drench for the ewe that seems slow lambing?
Yes. Yes, I have. And she had ketosis. She had early ketosis symptoms, and we treated her with propylene glycol, which is not the same as ethylene glycol, just to be clear. With propylene glycol and CMPK, and she was carrying triplets, and then she went into labor and labor stalled. So I gave her a oral drench of CMPK. It kicked labor back into full swing, and triplets were born. So yes. Do that under the advice of your veterinarian to determine dosage amount and how often.
So Tamia says that she has a ewe that just became fat last fall while on grass. That was the problem with Shamu. She just breathing. She gained weight breathing, with everyone else, but wasn't pregnant. She always gets huge with pregnancy, but never just randomly. I'm worried about her getting too fat and having problems. The vet gave her a shot, but I'm not seeing a change. And the user with Rams now. Any thought on management? I'm assuming that shot is to bring her into cycle, not to make her lose weight.
Yeah, so maybe they gave her, yeah, either to bring her into cycle, or if she's currently pregnant, to abort the lambs, or abort the fetuses that she's carrying. So I don't, yeah, there's some clarification on that question would be helpful. I don't know about
Oh,
necessarily about management. I mean, because some, like you were saying, Sam, you had this really chubby ewe who had triplets and never had any problems, probably because she was having triplets and those demands equaled out her body size.
and she was a large lamb. I mean, large ewe. She was very large. Yeah, she was
Yeah.
fat, but she was also, her frame was huge. And she never lost weight, even after she had those triplets. She would think they would have pulled her down, but they never did. Amazing. It was just amazing. So Tommy said it's to was to bring her into cycle, so to release an egg that may possibly be stuck and forcing high estrogen is what she's saying. I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know that I can speak to that. I think that's a veterinary question.
Jennifer, if you look in the slide deck, you'll probably see some pictures of the jugs. Jennifer wanted to know if we have pictures of the jugs, but maybe Lydia could send an additional photograph for me to share in the follow-up email.
Yes, I will do that. Yeah. And they're very simple to make. And we use these coils that come from Premier One, and you can order a bunch of them to be able to attach them together to like minimize the use of clips and to help keep them stable and not moving around all the time. So it's kind of something we've perfected. We used pallets before, and that was not safe. So I would never do that again.
All right, we are coming down to the end. I'm going to make this the last question. I'm going to do two questions, the next two questions. I'm really sorry if I didn't get to your question, guys. They're all really good. You guys are fantastic. Betty asks, how do you catch after lambing?
Very carefully. That's not an answer.
Sure it is.
You use the lambs to catch the ewe. So if you can grab the lambs and use them to lead a ewe from the lambing area to the post lambing area, that is what has worked best for us. And we're very fortunate in that many of our ewes have horns. So if they're if they're balking or not sure where they want to go, or they want to go back to the spot where they lambed, one person holds the lambs in front of the ewe and the other guides her gently using her horns.
Okay. Thank you. And I actually have a question in the chat, and he's asked it twice, or he or she has asked it twice. I want to make sure I get to the answer, and I think it's a good question. Can you quickly speak on line breeding versus inbreeding, trying to figure out how many years I can keep rams? Which I think is a good question.
It is a good question. So I think, so line breeding is as okay, and this is as far as I understand it, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it as well. Line breeding is specifically like mother to son, father to daughter. And inbreeding it can be sister to brother, and I would say this is not something I'm well versed on, so I don't want to speak to it like I'm an expert. I would say, as far as how long you keep a ram, I think I would consider like, what would be the reason to keep the ram? Do you want to improve your genetics? Is it just an amazing ram and you want to make sure there's tons of those genetics in your flock? Or is it a cost issue, or it's difficult to access new genetics? So I would assess why that would be important to you. And if you want to talk more about this, my email address is right here, and you can email me and we can discuss it privately in detail, because I think it's not a simple conversation.
I had there's a pig guy I got some pigs from, some Mayshans from, and he swears by breeding back to the father because he says that actually exposes, I don't know that I agree with him, but it was an interesting way to think about it. He said that exposes any potential mutations or potential problems you have in your
Yep.
line.
Yeah, recessive, it exposes the recessive genes, yes.
Yeah. So I don't know that I agree with that, but
Well,
that's
I
what
mean,
he
but you
swears
can, and I
by
mean,
it.
they've been doing that with beef cattle forever. I mean, you can go and look at these herds and they haven't brought in a new bull in 100 years or 50 years or something. So,
But the point would be you get rid of you cull out the animals that do,
right, you
that do
cull
have
out you
problems.
cull out the poor performers and you keep the amazing ones, but at some point you're gonna hit a wall, I would think. That would
Yeah.
be my opinion, and based on talking to other Icelandic sheep breeders specifically about that, you will.
Well, and it comes up a lot when you've got a breed that you're trying to bring back. And so
Yep.
I think that's part of the thing with the Méchants is you're trying to bring that breed back in any of those heritage breeds that maybe you sort of lost some of the diversity, the genetic diversity. All right, well, I'm really sorry, guys. We're going to have to cut this short. I know there's a lot more questions about calcium and some other things, and maybe we can go ahead and look at those, answer those questions in Lydia's next webinar, which everybody wants to be in March. So maybe we'll try and double up 1 week in March. Maybe, I don't know, Lydia, we'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. It's a busy spring for everybody, but it would be nice for people to have that information before they go into their lambing season.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I have a couple of housekeeping items before we sign off. A recording of this webinar and slides will be available within the next few days. These documents will be archived on our website, and I will email them to you as soon as I collect all of the information. That's going to be amazing from Lydia. We also have some other good webinars coming up this spring and winter. I will send links to all of our upcoming webinars and other opportunities for farmers and ranchers in a follow-up email. We are in the midst of scholarship season, so make sure you put in a scholarship application if you've got a conference or a course that you would like to take. So again, Lydia, you're always amazing. And so I'm not at all surprised that you would be amazing again. So really, really appreciate you and really appreciate how much attention you gave to this presentation and how much everybody shared and your wonderful questions. You guys are amazing. Anyway, goodbye for now, everybody. Hope to see you soon.